that kind of experience, I think, like really gives you like a core understanding of what a food forest is. Which yeah, of course we'll talk about more. But yeah, I think there is a big difference between like modern permaculture based, like modern permaculture theory based like food forests, and then like really experiencing like indigenous food forest systems. It's really powerful. So thank you for sharing. Um, oh, and Sandy, I like, yeah, your comment about eating fresh herbs, salad greens, and cherry tomatoes from your garden. Super cool. Okay, great. Well, 6:06, I want to respect everybody's time. So we'll get started. Let me just make sure nobody else is in the waiting room. All right, cool. So good evening, and thank you all so much for coming to Be More Beautiful's workshop about urban food forests. So just so everyone knows, this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel and sent out to all registered participants. So before we begin tonight's workshop, I wanted to just tell you a little bit about Be More Beautiful. So we're a city-led peer-to-peer beautification program. Our goal is to not only change behaviors and attitudes towards the beautification of our city, but to also encourage residents, businesses, and organizations to become directly involved in activities and projects that keep their neighborhoods clean. So to meet this goal, we work closely with neighborhoods on their unique beautification projects and cleanliness challenges, as well as provide educational literature, outreach materials, and other resources that residents can use to keep Baltimore beautiful. So I'll send out a resource list after this workshop with a link to our website where you can read more about our mission, view various grant opportunities, and volunteer opportunities that we offer in urban green spaces around Baltimore City. So tonight we'll be talking about urban food forests, as you know. So I'll be offering a brief overview of some of the main components of food forest cultivation and how they can be applied to create edible, perennial, ecologically regenerative, and community food justice-based landscapes in the city. If you have any questions while I'm presenting, please put them in the chat or save them for the end. I'll be talking for about an hour, and then we'll have a chance for a question and answer session around 7 p.m. And so while I'm presenting, please mute your microphones. I'm covering a lot of topics in this presentation, so please note that I'll be sending detailed information and resources about all the subjects I cover today during today's presentation in a follow-up email that should come to you either by tomorrow or this weekend. Okay. So I'm just gonna go ahead, and I'm sorry to everybody, I'm just gonna mute you all. Sorry. Okay. So a food forest is a sustainable gardening design. I'm sorry, let me make sure I didn't mute myself. I did not. Okay, cool. So a food forest is a sustainable gardening design based on woodland ecosystems, comprising around 7 main layers of vegetation from canopy trees down to ground covers. So a food forest mimics a forest edge that is cultivated with edible plants. Food forests are organized into mutually beneficial plant communities known as plant guilds that perform tasks such as nutrient accumulation, nitrogen fixation, increasing pollination, and attracting a variety of beneficial wildlife. The plants cultivated in a food forest all work together, help each other grow, and create a balanced ecosystem that provides an abundance of food and resources for local human and ecological communities. Swedish researchers Kyle Clark and Kimberly Nicholas keyed the term urban food forest in 2013 based on their research around home gardens, community orchards, and perennial urban agriculture. They defined the urban food forest as the intentional and strategic use of woody perennial food-producing species in urban edible landscapes to improve the sustainability and resilience of urban communities. So their research concluded that urban food forests integrate design principles and science from agroforestry, urban agriculture, and urban forestry, finding that such an approach can improve urban landscape productivity. So food forests support forest ecosystems and connect communities with nature. Trees of different sizes produce nuts and fruits, while their shade can support a variety of fresh, flavorful mushrooms, herbs, and berries. Trees in urban food forests also improve air quality and the retention of water. Food forests not only create self-regulating, regenerative, edible ecosystems, but they also bring people together into a communal space where a deep, life-giving relationship with the land can be cultivated. Food forests are often public and open for anyone to harvest from throughout the year. They can increase food sovereignty and lessen the need for ecologically destructive agricultural practices. When visiting a food forest, people not only can see where their food comes from, but they're also invited to become part of a functioning ecology in their participation with the food forest ecosystem. Food forests are designed to be low maintenance and require minimal inputs once established. By using perennial plants that come back year after year, a food forest can reduce the need for tillage and other soil disturbing practices that can damage the ecosystem. Perennial gardens don't disturb the soil regularly like annual gardens do. Rather, they continually enrich soil with organic matter as leaves fall and plants die back for the winter. Also, by mimicking the structure of a natural forest, a food forest can take advantage of natural processes like nutrient cycling and water retention. So despite popular beliefs, food forests are not a recent invention or product of the modern permaculture movement. Managing food forests for their edible benefits to humans is an ancient practice. In fact, existing ancient food forests have been found in countries in Africa, Asia, and the Americas, as Turtle Island, now known as so-called North America, was colonized. The colonists and anthropologists who surveyed the land didn't realize that the forests they encountered when first arriving in this country were managed systems. To them, these woodlands looked like untouched forests. And what they failed to acknowledge was the complex relationship indigenous communities shared with their local ecosystems. Indigenous societies didn't wander around aimlessly in search of food. In fact, they knew which areas produced desirable foods or medicines and at which time of year they produced them. This knowledge informed their movement, and as they moved through forests and prairie areas, they encouraged desirable plant species by cutting back the growth around them. Ultimately, this gave those desirable plants the space they needed to grow abundantly, helping them to thrive and reproduce. This was an early form of food forest gardening, and indigenous communities wouldn't have spent excessive amounts of time tending these spaces. However, desired plants would certainly have been given an advantage over other plants through this type of management. And so this was effective in creating predominantly edible and medicinal forested landscapes. A notable ancient edible landscape is the 2,000-plus-year-old food forest in Morocco, in a village known as Inrarin. Probably pronouncing that wrong. 800 people continue to farm this desert oasis to this day, growing date palms, bananas, olives, figs, pomegranates, guavas, citruses, and mulberries. There's also a 300-year-old food forest in Vietnam that has been cultivated by the same family for over 28 generations. Food forests have also been found in Kerala, India, and in the Himalayan foothills of Nepal, as well as Zambia, Zimbabwe, like I said, Vietnam, Sri Lanka, and Indonesia. In Mexico, food forests are known as family orchards and are cultivated for generations to produce culturally relevant and ecologically integrated crops. For thousands of years, the science behind food forests and their environmental significance was only known to small subsistence communities and rural families who tended them. Okay, I'm sorry for some reason. Okay, there we go. Slide wasn't clicking. So yeah, modern forest gardening is classified as an aspect of the field of permaculture. Permaculture is the conscious design and maintenance of agriculturally productive ecosystems that have the diversity, stability, and resilience of natural ecosystems. Any design using the principles of permaculture will be more effective, efficient, and ecologically balanced. Permaculture works to minimize or close loops to energy losses wherever possible to create sustainable systems. Forest gardens are sustainable systems that cycle nutrients in a continuous way. Once established, food forests continue to survive independently with only minimal maintenance required. So community food forests are built environments intended to integrate ecological complexity within the social systems of a community to offer a range of benefits. Community food forests can be established on public or private lands. Communally established and managed food forests are a sustainable way to address the increased need for urban food security, resilient community, and productive public lands. For community food forests to be successful, the key is collaboration and partnership with committed community members who will manage the plantings once established. Volunteer groups, youth and civic organizations, or nature and gardening clubs are usually imperative to establishing and managing a food forest in a local urban community. And the people involved need to create policies on care, management, and harvesting of the food forest. While the edible and medicinal plants food forests produce are central to its purpose, the most important yield from a community food forest is education. The forest can serve as a tool for learning about ecology, sustainable food production, food literacy, and civic engagement in community initiatives. It can also provide an introduction to cultural practices such as foraging and gathering non-timber forest products. So community food forests can also act as essential infrastructure for ecologically regenerative urban development to promote climate resilience and adaptation. Presently, cities are highly consumptive of products produced elsewhere, making them one of the most pressing challenges to global sustainability. Food is one such product. Multifunctional self-feeding community agricultural initiatives stand in contrast to the unsustainable, mutually reinforcing characteristics of homogenization, productivism, and commodification that currently dominate the industrial agriculture landscape. The negative effects from industrial agriculture jeopardize human health, well-being, and threaten Earth's planetary boundaries, the biophysical limits necessary to maintain favorable human life. The need to rethink agricultural practices and systems is inspiring novel solutions, both for food production and participation within urban green spaces. Community food forests are one such type of food forestry practice capable of addressing a large range of ecosystem service needs. In 2016, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations published guidelines promoting urban forestry as one way to create multifunctional landscapes to incorporate a diverse range of ecosystem services. The Food and Agriculture Organization encouraged the removal of barriers to the development and incorporation of food forests and encouraged coordination among municipal authorities and civil society actors on food production in urban areas. Urban food forests have the potential to address specific UN development goals, including food and nutritional security, zero hunger, and the development of sustainable cities and communities by addressing provisionary and human well-being needs in a manner that is both ecologically and socially sustainable. Food forests also help mitigate climate change by sequestering carbon from the atmosphere. Since they have trees, shrubs, and perennial plants, food forests can store more carbon in their biomass and the soil compared to other food systems or land use, such as annually tilled crops or lawns. Having an abundance of locally sourced foods in the community minimizes greenhouse gas emissions, as well as particularly those caused by transportation across our modern food system. Urban food forests also promote urban cooling, reduce flooding, and significantly increase access to green space. Effectively managed food forests on vacant lots have the potential to provide hundreds of, or even thousands of pounds of fresh produce to city residents every year. So now that we know a bit about their history and benefits, let's talk about the components that make up and define a food forest. So traditionally, there are 7 layers of a food forest. although some permaculture practitioners are integrating an eighth layer to acknowledge the work with the mycelial networks, which are a vital component of any forest system. Layers are one of the many tools used to design and implement functional ecosystems, which are sustainable and of direct benefit to humans. Mature ecosystems have a large number of relationships between their component parts: trees, understory, ground cover, soil, fungi, insects, and animals. Because trees and plants grow to different heights, it is extremely easy to grow a diverse community of life in a small space using a food forest design. So the first layer of a food forest is the overstory. The overstory layer in a food forest is comprised of full-size fruits, nuts, or other useful trees, with spaces between to let plenty of light reach the lower layers. Typically, these trees should be 30 feet or higher. This layer is for larger forest gardens. Timbered trees, nut trees, and nitrogen-fixing trees are the typical trees in this category. There are a number of larger fruiting trees that can be used here as well, depending on the species, varieties, and rootstocks used. Some multifunctional fruit and nut trees you can plant in this layer include apples, pears, cherries, chestnut trees, and walnut trees. Nitrogen fixing trees will help build soil, and most bear blossoms that attract pollinators. These include black locust, mesquite, and alder. And canopy trees will define the major patterns of your forest garden, so they must be chosen carefully. You can plant them with careful regard to their mature size, so enough light will fall between them to support other plants. Trees and other woody perennial plants are integral in ecological gardening because they are extremely productive with a variety of outputs such as shade, habitat, food, wood, and mulch. Overstory trees also sequester carbon and water, enrich the soil, accumulate nutrients, and are resilient, aesthetically pleasing, and perennial. Love that for them. So the next layer is the subcanopy. This layer is typically 10 to 30 feet high. In most food forests with limited space, these plants make up the acting canopy layer, so this could be more applicable for urban spaces. The majority of fruit trees fall into this layer, such as service berries, apricots, plums, peaches, nectarines, almonds, medlar, and mulberries. In the subcanopy layer, you can also plant shade-tolerant fruits, such as persimmons and pawpaws, which are also Maryland natives. Hazelnut trees can also be grown in this layer. These trees can easily be pruned into an open form, which allows light to reach the other species beneath them. Both large and small nitrogen-fixing trees grow quickly in this layer and can be pruned heavily to generate plenty of mulch and compost. So our next layer is the shrub layer, which is typically up to 10 feet in height. The majority of fruiting bushes fall into this layer. This includes many nuts, flowering, medicinal, and other beneficial plants such as blueberries, raspberries, blackberries, roses, witch hazel, spice bush, huckleberries, and butterfly bush, just to name a few. Shrubs can be chosen to emphasize food, crafts, ornamentals, birds, insects, native plants, or just raw biodiversity. And shrubs come in all sizes and thus can be plugged into edges, openings, and niches of many forms. Shade-tolerant varieties can lurk beneath the trees, and sun-loving plants can thrive in the sunny spaces between them. So the fourth layer in a food forest is the herbaceous layer. Plants in this layer die back to the ground every winter. They do not produce woody stems as the shrub layer does. Many culinary and medicinal herbs are in this layer. A large variety of other beneficial plants fall into this layer as well. Shade-loving plants can peek out from beneath taller trees, while sun-worshipping species will thrive in the open spaces. At the edges of this layer, at the edges of this layer, you can grow more traditional garden beds of plants that are completely dependent on full sun. Um, so this means your vegetables, that are annuals, and also you can plant perennial vegetables and self-seeding vegetables, which are usually a great option for food forests. Um, and you can also cultivate native flowers for beneficial insects in this layer, as well as nitrogen-fixing flowers such as lupine. So next is the ground cover layer. There's some overlap with this in the herbaceous layer, and yeah, so this and the ground cover layer kind of are a bit in between. However, in this layer, they're often shade tolerant plants, which grow much closer to the ground, grow densely to fill bare patches of soil, and often can tolerate a lot of foot traffic potentially. Um, these plants are low ground hugging plants, preferably varieties that offer food or habitat that snuggle into the edges and spaces between your shrubs and herbs. And some species that you can cultivate in this layer are strawberries, nasturtiums, clovers, creeping thyme, bugleweed, and there's many other varieties of flowers such as fox and verbena, which can be in this layer. Um, and so, yeah, the ground cover layer plays a critical role in weed prevention, occupying the ground that would otherwise potentially succumb to invasive plants or other weeds that you don't really want or use. Yeah, so next we have the vertical or climber layer. These vine and climbing plants span multiple layers depending on how they are trained or what they climb on naturally. They're a great way to add some productivity to a small space. And this layer is for plants that will twine up trunks and branches, filling the unused regions of the all-important third dimension with food and habitat. So here you can grow edible and medicinal plants such as kiwi berries, also known as hardy kiwis, grapes, hops, and passion flowers. You can also grow climbers for wildlife, such as honeysuckle or trumpet flowers. And these can include climbing annuals as well, such as squash, some varieties of squash that climb, cucumbers and melons. And some of the perennial vines can be invasive or strangling, hence they should be used sparingly and cautiously. So next we have the underground layer. These are root crops. There are an amazing variety of edible roots that most people have never even heard of. Many of these plants can be utilized in the herbaceous layer, the vining or climbing layer, as well as the ground cover layer as well. Most of the plants for the root or underground layer should be shallow rooted, such as garlic or onions, or maybe easy to dig vegetables such as potatoes, or Jerusalem artichokes. And yeah, unfortunately, deep rooted varieties may not work the best because digging them will require disturbing other plants in the food forest system. But if you don't mind that, you can try different plants like, I don't know, taro or yucca. So below our underground layer is the mycelial fungal layer. Fungal networks live in healthy soils. They will live on and even within the roots of plants in your food forest. And this underground fungal network transports nutrients and moisture from one area of the forest to another, depending on the needs of the plants. In addition to the vital work this layer contributes to developing and maintaining the forest, it will even provide mushrooms from time to time that can be utilized for food and medicine. And with a bit of care and attention, this layer can be cultivated intentionally to dramatically increase the perennial harvest of a food forest. So now that we have an idea about the various layers that comprise a food forest, we'll talk about how to cultivate mutually beneficial relationships between your plants. So all plants naturally grow with other species in nature rather than in single species groups. Through years of observation and experimentation, gardeners notice that some plants make good companions while others don't. Companion planting is the practice of growing several types of crops near one another to enhance crop production. One of the most popular companion plantings is the indigenous technology of the Three Sisters Garden design, which includes corn, bean, and squash. Taller plants such as corn can provide a natural support trellis and shelter for beans, peas, and other climbing crops. In return, beans and peas provide nitrogen to the soil for the corn and the squash plants. And squash and pumpkin leaves shade the smaller bean and pea plants that need sun protection and provide weed suppression. There are many advantages to look for when selecting companion plants. You should aim for plants you select to serve multiple functions. We'll go over some of those functions now. So nitrogen fixers play a crucial role in your food forest. Using plants to keep nutrients cycling will mean that you don't need to buy fertilizers, basically. Nitrogen fixers have a mutually beneficial symbiotic relationship with bacteria or fungi found in the soil that take nitrogen from the air and convert it into nitrogen that other plants can use. Types of nitrogen fixers are actinorhizal plants, which partner with a group of actinobacteria called Frankia. These plants include Rosaceae, also known as the rose family, such as hawthorns, raspberries, strawberries, apples, pears, and brambles, as well as Elagnaceae, trying to get my pronunciation right with these, such as autumn olives and alders. Legumes are another type of nitrogen fixing plant, which partner with rhizome bacteria that form nodules on plant roots. They turn nitrogen gas into nitrates to feed the plants, which then makes nutrients available to other plants via its leaves and annual root replenishing cycle. Nitrogen fixing legumes include vetch, Dutch clover, lupines, and fava beans. So dynamic mineral accumulating plants use a deep taproot to access nutrients that other plants can't access. Their long roots mean that they aren't in competition with other plants, and they are able to harvest otherwise inaccessible nutrients. You can take comfrey, for example. We'll talk about comfrey a few times in this presentation. Although the plant can only reach into the soil about 2 feet, into the soil about 2 feet, its roots actually can reach 5 feet below ground in search of nutrients. So nutrient-packed leaves can be chopped down and used as mulch around your tree guild as well. And the leaves make a brilliant organic fertilizer for your crops. So every dynamic mineral accumulator will draw specific nutrients from the soil and concentrate them in the leaves. You can experiment with plants to see what works best in your space and what nutrients your plants might need. Some examples of dynamic accumulators are borage, like I said, comfrey, chickweed, yarrow, stinging nettle, strawberry, sorrel, vetch, supine, and tansy. So there are certain plants that you can use to repel pests in your garden or your food forest because they dislike their scent or other qualities. So you can choose repellent plants carefully as they tend to repel beneficial insects as well as pests in your garden. So just kind of try paying attention to what pests you have and weigh that against, if those plants also like detract pollinators potentially. So there's pest repellents such as daffodil that can work well around the edge of your food forest if you have problems with deers. And some examples of pest repelling plants are onions, chives, garlic, daffodils, marigolds, and nasturtiums. So there are many plants which attract beneficial insects to your garden. These insects are beneficial either because they help pollinate your plants or because they eat pests that damage crops. Attractor plants can also be edible herbs such as fennel, dill, lavender, and coriander, flowers like salvia, sunflowers, nasturtiums, and yarrow. So suppressor plants, usually ground covers, will suppress grasses and weeds that compete with trees for nutrients and water. They will also help to retain moisture and build soil structure. Suppressors are especially important for young fruit trees as they will be more susceptible to drying out and competition from weeds. Suppressor plants include red clover, thyme, squash, pumpkins, rhubarb, and strawberries. So plants that create green mulch will add additional nutrients to your soil. Green mulch, also known as living mulch, is usually a low-growing crop or crops planted beneath your main crops to suppress weeds, retain water, and even improve the soil. So for example, some plants in the legume family are nitrogen rich and will release nitrogen into the soil as they decompose. Plants like comfrey, once again, are high in carbon and will do the same. And some great vines that can be used as green mulch are cowpeas and sweet potatoes. And yeah, so plants that create green mulch biomass also help remediate compacted soil. When soil is compacted, there is very little space for air and water. Without the presence of oxygen, life in the soil begins to die. Beneficial microorganisms, worms, nematodes, and all the other important microbes and life in the soil cannot survive without oxygen, water, or minerals to feed on. So to fix compacted soil with mulch, just cover the top of the soil with protective layers of biomass. Do not just till it in. Just keep adding layers of biomass to the top of the soil and allow it to decompose over time. Green mulch creates humidity, which encourages and supports beneficial bacteria to grow in the soil. And you can either allow weeds to grow until you're ready to plant there, or cover soil up with whatever leaves, weeds, and sticks you can find. This protective layer holds in moisture and creates a habitat for the small forms of life, such as single-celled organisms that enrich the soil. So other plants that can help break up compacted soil, which is especially useful for urban soils, which are usually compacted through years of industrial development and degradation, are plants that have strong tap roots. These tap roots burst through heavy compacted soils and are also edible and can make a great addition to your food forest. So these taproot heavy plants include daikon radishes, artichokes, surprisingly mustards, cowpeas, chicory, and dandelions. Also, I read alfalfa is one of these. I haven't tried that out yet, but apparently it is. So increasing water infiltration is an important function to consider when choosing plants for your food forest. Many native plants do this work naturally, but crops such as buckwheat, crimson clover, hairy vetch, and strawberry clover also increase water infiltration into the soil. Increasing water infiltration in the soil can help prevent soil surface sealing, where the soil becomes impermeable after rainfalls. It can also aid in improving soil structure with increased soil aggregate stability, soil porosity, and water storage capacity. So some other functions that may seem obvious that you can consider when planting for your food forest are if they can provide food and medicine for humans and wildlife. And some plants such as high bush cranberry, honeyberry, and elderberry can function for all three of these benefits. So now that we've considered the various benefits plants can provide, we'll go over just a few examples of companion planting ideas for some popular crops. Um, so growing tomatoes can be a big challenge for urban gardeners because of all of the pest problems they face. So if yellow striped armyworms are problematic in your garden, then thyme is a great choice among tomato companion plants. Researchers at Iowa State found that interplanting tomatoes with thyme or basil resulted in a reduction in egg laying by adult armyworms. Thyme also makes a great living mulch around tomato plants. But just keep in mind that it's perennial, so the plants will have to be moved when tomato plants are rotated to a new garden spot each season. Cowpeas are a favorite of the southern green stink bug. Because of this, counterintuitively, a nearby planting of cowpeas will lure stink bugs away from your tomato crops, saving it from significant damage. We call this a sacrifice planting. Green stink bugs feed on many different fruits and vegetables, causing stripping and corking of the fruiting flesh. So just make sure you plant your cowpeas several feet away from your tomatoes and sow them several weeks before you plant your tomatoes if you choose this companion plant. And you can also plant radishes around the base of your tomato plant to lure flea beetles away. Flea beetles don't move very far, so for these tomato companion plants to work, they must be immediately adjacent to your tomatoes. Flea beetles much prefer radish foliage to tomatoes and will chew holes in the radish leaves instead of destroying your young tomato plants. Mature tomato plants can withstand a good bit of flea beetle damage, but young transplants can really suffer. And pak choi also makes another great, excellent sacrificial trap for flea beetles. If harlequin bugs, which are super common in Baltimore, attack your tomatoes every season, then this companion planting strategy could be great for you. Harlequin bugs are most prevalent in warm regions in the US, but their range is expanding northward because of climate change. They favor plants in the cabbage family and can be lured away from tomatoes by planting collards nearby. These bugs produce several generations per year, so plant your sacrificial collards several weeks before planting your tomatoes and place them around the periphery of the garden, several feet away from the plants you want to protect. And most popular companion plant, basil for tomatoes, is one of the most important tomato companion plants for your garden, most notably when it comes to deterring thrips and tomato hornworms. While traditional companion planting may tell you that this is because the scent of basil drives away these pests, this likely isn't the case, actually. More recent research indicates that basil works because the volatile chemicals released by the basil plants mask the scent of tomato plants, making it harder for these pests to find their host plant. I thought that was really interesting. And on tomatoes, thrips transmit tomato spotted wilt virus and cause stunted growth and stippling on the fruits. Hornworms eat the foliage of tomato plants, leaving only the stems behind. So interplanting tomatoes with basil has been shown to limit the egg-laying behaviors of adult hornworm moths and to limit damage from thrips. So yeah, I mean, I know these are a lot of different pests that maybe not everybody's familiar with. So if you grow tomatoes one year and you notice a lot of pests, just try and do your best to identify them, and then you can implement some of these companion plants the next year. So some great companion plants for collard greens include mugwort, thyme, rosemary, and hyssop, which all keep away cabbage moths. Mint improves soil conditions and the flavor of collard greens. And growing catnip near collards can also improve the flavor of your collard greens, another mint family. And so onions, oregano, and marjoram also improve soil conditions for collards. You can plant potatoes with collards to help loosen the soil around them. And Dill lowers the population of cabbage worms by attracting wasps, um, beneficial wasps, not the ones that sting you, hopefully. Um, maybe sometimes. Garlic will also keep away various pests, great companion plant for a lot of different plants. And chamomile and southernwood can also improve the growth behavior of collard greens. For cucumbers, some great companion plants are peas, corn, beans, and lentils. These plants' root systems increase nitrogen in the soil, which will benefit your cucumber plants. Mature corn stalks also provide natural support for climbing cucumbers and provide much needed shade in sun-scorched spaces. Radishes, beets, carrots, and onions work well with cucumbers because they do not spread and compete for space, as most of their growth occurs beneath the soil. Conversely, cucumbers have one long taproot and many shallow roots that grow and spread close to the soil surface, and the fruits grow above the ground. Root vegetables and cucumbers both thrive in well-tilled soil. Radishes help repel cucumber beetles. And marigolds and nasturtiums help repel beetles, thrips, and other destructive insects that can devastate your cucumber crop. So sunflowers can be a natural trellis for climbing cucumber vines when growing in small areas. But when growing cucumbers that you plan to trellis on sunflowers, it's best to pick a lightweight cucumber species to prevent them from becoming too heavy for your sunflower stalks. Plus, sunflowers are pollinator superheroes, and studies show that having them as companion plants can increase cucumber crop yields. And oregano and dill repel bothersome insects, and dill attracts predatory insects like the wasps to help get rid of other pests in your garden. And also many companion planting enthusiasts swear by dill for improving the flavor of cucumbers. I can see that kind of pickle thing going on. And garlic can promote cucumber growth and decrease the chances of plants developing fusarium wilt by beneficially affecting the soil's microbe structure or microbiome structure. Zucchini, another popular urban garden crop that has a lot of great companion plants. So when planting zucchini and other squash, keep in mind that they are heavy feeders and require more nutrients than most plants. Planting beans with zucchini fixes nitrogen levels in the soil to balance the pH level. Borage is a flower that not only attracts beneficial insects like bees, but can deter pest worms from your zucchini. Dill is an herb that repels pests like cucumber beetles and flea beetles by attracting the beneficial insects. As you can see, dill is great for all these plants. Plant a bunch of dill. And another plant that we have mentioned a lot, garlic, in this case, is beneficial for the strong sulfur compounds, which it possesses that repel pests like aphids, that affect zucchinis pretty heavily. And marigolds attract pests like mosquitoes, whiteflies, aphids, squash bugs, and squash vine borers. Or they detract, sorry. They detract those pests. Don't bring mosquitoes into your food forest. And so you can plant marigolds nearby to ensure that these pests don't damage your plants. And so the aroma of different mint plants, including hyssop and sage, will repel grazing animals like deer. Surprisingly, also deer are an issue in Baltimore City in some parts. And so yeah, nasturtiums are great. They're pretty. They are edible, and they will actually attract aphids. So while this seems counterintuitive, many gardeners plant nasturtiums a short distance away from their vegetable gardens to attract aphids from their crops, and Phacelia flowers that promote good pollination in squash vegetables and attract pollinators are really an awesome choice for a companion plant for zucchinis. And oregano and rosemary are aromatic herbs that can repel earworms from your zucchini. So there are literally millions of combinations of companion plants for all of your different vegetables that you would want to grow. So I'll be sending out resources where you can figure out what kinds of companion planting systems that you might want to create for your garden this spring. So those are just a few. Yeah, I know some of the concepts are a bit counterintuitive, and it's kind of like figuring out this dynamic relationship between your plants and the potential problems and pests and benefits. So it takes practice, and it takes observation of your plants over years. But it's a good thing to keep in mind. So yeah, now that we have this basic understanding of companion planting, we'll move on to how these mutually beneficial plant communities can be integrated into the design of a food forest. So plant guilds are planting systems designed to replicate the natural tendency for wild plants to grow together in multi-species groups. Plant guilds are a step up from companion planting. Rather than just looking at one or two plant combinations, the goal is to create a diverse ecosystem of multifunctional plant communities. Guilds typically have plants that perform multiple useful ecological functions, like we talked about earlier, that support each other's health in a variety of ways. Um, Plant guilds are a combination of form and function. The goal is to mimic the stacking and relationships found in nature while also providing valuable resources to humans. Guilds are limited only by our imagination and can include, as we mentioned before, edible fruit, vegetables, roots, animal fodder, medicinal plants, nitrogen fixers, forage for pollinators, insectaries, pest control, biomass, and raw materials for lumber, crafts, fiber, fuel sources, and more. Unlike monocultures, guilds are biodiverse, interdependent polycultures of plants, insects, microorganisms, and animals. A polyculture is defined by the simultaneous cultivation or growth of two or more compatible plants or organisms, especially crops in a single area. Polyculture guilds are three-dimensional, extending beneath the soil with plants connected by a mycelial network. So when designing a guild, consider the interrelationships between members of that guild. And a key aspect of designing guilds is to place plants in relationship to each other in a way that facilitates interconnection rather than competition. Planting guilds around productive fruit and nut trees can add a variety of benefits to your food forest. So when planning your plant guilds, like I said earlier, let your site inform your design. This takes a lot of observation. So it's a really good idea to take time, even though, we want to get to planting as soon as possible. Yeah, really taking a good amount of time to observe the site where you plan to plant your guild is important. So some considerations you may want to integrate into your design are sun, soil, water, wind, and aesthetic factors. So when observing how the sun affects your potential food forest location, consider the following questions. When does sun hit this location? How long does sun last? How does the sun move through this location? Is this location in full sun, partial sun, or full shade? So just keep in mind that most fruit trees require full sun. However, species such as pawpaw, Saskatoon berries, cornelian cherries, and hazelnuts tolerate partial shade. And so when observing your soil, you should consider if it's clay, and poorly drained or sandy and well drained. Consider if your soil is rich with organic matter. Does it have a healthy soil microorganism life? Most of these factors can be determined with a simple soil test that you can either do yourself, DIY, or purchase from your local nursery. And so when observing how water interacts with your space, consider if rainfall is consistent throughout the season. Are there opportunities to capture, divert, or store rainwater? Do you have supplementary irrigation available? These factors may inform what plants thrive in the space you want to grow a food forest in, and can create opportunities to design your space to maximize the benefits of various natural water sources on your site. And considerations to make with the wind are to observe if there are cold winds in the winter or hot summer winds that affect your potential food forest area. And then some aesthetic considerations are related to how others in the community might perceive this space and how it may fit into the surrounding neighborhood. In urban areas, this is especially important because your local community's perception and resulting involvement will determine how much the space is utilized and consistently cared for by the community. Also, it may be helpful to think about the existing problems on your potential food forest site. So consider all the issues you may encounter first and match them to a plant that can solve these potential issues. This planning process is greatly helped by taking observations from the planting location ahead of time. So just make sure you consider potential problems with rampant pests, aggressive weeds, heavy fruit or nut tree sources from your food forest trees. So yeah, problems of abundance are good to have, but can also be problems if they're not managed. So one of the most popular types of food forest guilds is a fruit tree guild. A fruit tree guild can stand alone in your landscape, or it can grow over time into an edible forest garden. So how you plant a fruit tree guild will depend on the space you have available. When you first begin planning your fruit tree guild, you'll want to choose a tree that works both in terms of size, but also climate. If you have a small garden, then choose a dwarf fruit tree variety or small berry bush as the central element to your guild. A combination of trees works well, as it will prevent a single disease from spreading easily between trees. So for example, you could choose a combination of apples, plums, cherries, peaches, hazelnuts, chestnuts, or walnuts. So after you choose a tree that will work best in your area, you'll want to start building the base of your fruit tree guild. You can do this by layering out cardboard in a circle around the base of your planted tree. Your circle needs to be as large as the drip line, which means where the outermost tree leaves will come to when your tree reaches maturity. Then you can add a layer of compost and soil around 5 inches deep, but keep it away from the direct base of the tree trunk. And then you can add a thick layer of mulch, such as wood chips. So next, you can choose plants for your fruit tree guild. Your guild will consist of a group of companion plants that work together to support your fruit tree. So as we said, or as I said before, the aim is to try and recreate a forest-like, naturally sustaining environment where all of these plants that you grow thrive. So yeah, choosing plants for particular trees that serve more than one purpose, such as garlic and chives, which repel insects and prevent grass from creeping into your guild and are edible. You know, try and stack functions like that for every plant that you decide to grow around your fruit tree. So along the drip line, you can plant grass suppressing bulbs, which will help to stop grass from moving inside your guild and competing with your tree roots. So daffodils are a good option for this if you have issues with deer. Avoid mixing edibles with daffodils, which can transmit some poisonous qualities. And so if you prefer to plant an edible if you prefer to plant an edible, then you can plant garlic chives or Egyptian onions. Inside the drip line, scatter a mix of pollinator attracting plants that will soon be buzzing with bees and drawing nutrients from deep in the ground. And you can experiment with mixes until you find a dynamic that works seamlessly in your space. So yeah, now we'll take a look at some examples of various guilds you can plant. So all of the diagrams in these slides are from the Midwest Permaculture Organization, who I'll send a link to their work following this email. But they have made all this information free and available for public use. So credit goes to them for these wonderful guild designs. So pictured on this slide is an example of what we just talked about of a fruit tree guild. There are at least 2 plant species you can use at the center of this particular fruit tree guild. One is a shade-tolerant viburnum species, which can be high bush cranberry, for example. High bush cranberry grows to 12 feet, or it can grow to 12 feet, with an 8-foot spread and is shade tolerant. Its fruits are used similarly to common cranberries, but the plant can grow in ordinary garden soil instead of a bog. So the other option for this design is to use a standard sized fruit tree at the center of this guild, which can grow to as much as 50 feet tall. And surrounding either of these are dwarf or semi-dwarf fruit trees of varying species such as apples, pears, peaches, and nectarines, as well as plums or cherries. Yeah, and so as I mentioned earlier, using a diversity of fruit tree species can minimize insect predation and disease in the orchard. Hazels produce edible nuts rich in oil and provide an abundant source of nutrients for wildlife, such as squirrels, chipmunks, and pheasants. They can be coppiced after 8 years to stimulate higher nut yields and for a yield of coppiced wood for everything from charcoal to garden fencing, very multifunctional with its uses and applications. And then spring bulbs, especially trout lilies, can hold nutrients that would otherwise wash away during spring runoff. Taprooted plants such as horseradish, comfrey, evening primrose, and milk vetch all dredge subsoil minerals from the soil, making them available for uptake by your fruit trees. And yeah, strawberries can be used in sunny areas, while wild ginger can be planted in shady spots. Wild ginger can be used as a common ginger substitute. It's also a Maryland native. Asparagus at the edges of this guild brings a delicious spring harvest of its shoots. Shallow rooted, it can allow for the planting of some less dense, later yielding herbs such as lemon balm and even garden greens like lettuce, mustard, and kale. And including flowering herbs such as dill, coriander, fennel, and yarrow along the sunny edges of this guild can attract pollinators and insect predators. So another type of guild you can grow is bee guild, which will work as an anchor for attracting pollinators into your garden. This is a guild conceived and designed to specifically attract pollinators. So at its center is the little leaf linden. A related tree is the American linden or basswood. The young leaves of the linden are edible, and the tree can be coppiced to allow a near continuous yield of leaves. The flowers of all lindens are a bee attractant and premium nectar source for delicious honey. The American linden can be used to make dugout canoes, and its inner bark is useful as cordage. And coppice wood of all the lindens can be used again as charcoal or fencing material. Lots of stacking functions there. And around the linden tree at a distance of at least 10 feet or more can be planted with hip-bearing shrub roses, such as rose apple, rugosa or rugosa rose. Um, and the flowers and leaves have uses as cosmetics, like rose water, and as tea. And while the hips can be used for syrups and vitamin C supplements, um, the flowers of roses are also attractive to bees and wasps and other pollinators. Um, the rose apple grows to about 10 feet tall, while rugosa roses are variable in height from 2 to 8 feet tall. Um, and additional rose species, such as Damascus rose and French rose, are also fragrance sources in the cosmetic and essential oil industry. Very useful plants for attracting pollinators are members of the Silphium genus. Cup plant in this genus holds water in its leaf axils, hence its common name. And cup plant is also a source of antitussive medicinal properties. Other members of the Silphium genus include the compass plant and rosenweed. One desirable aspect of this genus is that there is their ability to form a seasonal hedge along a property line. And all of these species attract bees as well as butterflies. Um, and yeah, when the seeds have set of the cup plant, goldfinches will come in masses to harvest their fill. And lovage, pictured in this guild, is a deep tap-rooted accumulator of subsoil minerals. It's an excellent perennial substitute for celery. And when dried, its leaves are a source of flavor and soup stocks, and its seeds can be used in place of conventional celery seeds. Its roots are medicinal for the common cold, and its flowers are attractive to beneficial predatory wasps. And lower growing perennials in this guild include members of the Ignatia genus, like purple coneflower, which attract bees and are sources of potent immune boosting, enhancing and enhancing tonic medicinals. And many Ignatias are also rooted dynamic accumulators of minerals in the soil. Comfrey, bringing up comfrey again, is a bee attractor that can draw pollinators, as well as create that green mulch we talked about. And a lesser known native pollinator friendly variety, turtle heads. Turtle head flowers are so beautiful. They have a herbal medicine application as laxatives and are also a really valuable pollen source for bumblebees. And spring bulbs are a source of early season pollen for insect species and often sustain them until other plants with choice pollen bloom. There are late blooming plants such as sages that can attract bees, butterflies, and several moths late in the blooming season. Mints can be used as both a ground cover and attractant for bees. They also are excellent for flavoring foods, teas, and plant-based medicines. Caraway, parsley, and fennel all serve as host plants for butterflies and beneficial insects, and as food for humans. All of them will self-sow if allowed to set seed, so you don't have to keep planting them every year. And so yeah, the bee guilds can also act as a living classroom for educating local neighbors or children about pollinators and their relationship with plants. So the last plant guild example we'll look at is a serviceberry guild. Serviceberries are wonderful native edibles. native to Maryland, that are widely available in Baltimore and are even given away for free by Tree Baltimore. Shout out to Tree Baltimore. Check out their website for their free tree giveaways for city residents. Serviceberry is an early blooming and early yielding fruit tree. This species has multiple other names, including sarvisberry, deerberry, shadblow, Saskatoon or Saskatoon, and Juneberry. It is a beautiful plant when in bloom during April. And there are numerous species ranging in height from 3 feet to nearly 60 feet, with a spread from 3 feet to 30 feet. They can sucker to form a thicket, but can be controlled by mowing. They don't require acidic soil and will grow in most situations from damp soil to clay or sandy loams. And because of their ability to thrive in both full sun and semi-shade, the serviceberry can grow beneath semi-dwarf and standard fruit trees. Serviceberry is low in vitamin C, but does have high amounts of protein, fat, and fiber. And it's also high in pectin, great to throw in with some homemade jams. And when berries ripen, the fruits draw robins, cedar waxwings, and chipmunks. So be ready to harvest their fruits early, or you won't get any. And so examples of overstory fruit trees for this guild would be apples or pears, or the semi-dwarfing rootstocks on the semi-dwarfing rootstocks of your choice. And tall or semi-dwarf stone fruits such as apricots, peaches, or plums are also good choices, as long as the variety of serviceberries used does not shade them out. Hazels could also be used as an intermediate layer between the fruit trees and the shorter serviceberry species. Currants and gooseberries can also be grown beneath the serviceberry. And climbers that can be used to grow into either the fruit trees or the serviceberries are runner beans or groundnuts. Groundnut is a vine varying in length from 5 to 30 feet. It produces an edible root and also fixes nitrogen, benefiting neighboring plants. The groundnut, like the serviceberry, is much more tolerant of damp soils than most fruit trees. So when planting the serviceberries in a damp site using groundnut vines, this can also be a plus. So there are rootstock types for many fruits that are adapted to damp soils. So it's possible to use fruit trees in some of those wetter sites that you may be wanting to plant your food forest on. And so in the understory of this guild, comfrey and horseradish can be used as deep-rooted pumps to bring subsoil nutrients to the upper root zones of the other species. And lemon balm is a semi-woody short shrub with both culinary and medicinal antiviral uses that can grow along the sunny edges of this guild. Spring bulbs can be used to fill the empty spaces but beneath the guild before trees and shrubs have leafed out. Trout lilies are native spring ephemeral, leafing out early, and then as summer approaches, they shed leaves and go dormant. Trout lilies bioaccumulate phosphorus in their leaves at a time of the year when heavy rain and snowmelt can wash nutrients off site. They then release the nutrients back into the soil when the plant goes dormant in June. White clover acts as a ground cover to hold soil on slopes from eroding. Clover accumulates nitrogen through beneficial bacteria relationships and attracts both honeybees and other pollinators. Mint, wild ginger, and comfrey are all useful in providing bee nectar and can form the foundation of a nearby apiary guild. And taller and later blooming shrub species that can contribute to additional nectar are summersweet and raspberries. And yeah, attracting insect pest predators can be done by growing parsley, fennel, caraway, and dill, as we've mentioned before. And many beneficial wasps depend on these plants. And butterflies, especially swallowtail species, use these plants as their larval food sources. Onion-related species such as garlic, chives, leeks, and ramps, as well as other ornamental alliums, can all help ward off plant pests when used as either foliar sprays or as companion plants. So there are some vibrant examples of food forests in Maryland that you can visit to gain inspiration for creating your own urban food forest. Here in Baltimore, there is the Clifton Park Food Forest, which is a permaculture system developed to provide a lasting food resource for the surrounding community. It's a home to pawpaws, black walnuts, serviceberries, apples, and many other species. And it's a valuable food resource for local wildlife. Currently, it's managed by Crone and Forest Flowers, which is a Black-owned flower farm cooperative in Baltimore City. So I'll be sending out info about that space if you want to check it out if you're a local. And so the University of Maryland, Baltimore County also maintains a food forest on their main campus. They describe this forest as a perennial edible landscape created in connection with UMBC in their main garden, UMBC's main garden, which includes plants that are being incorporated into a really cool project they have called a climate change monitoring garden. So they've got a lot of cool research going on and are incorporating food foresting into that research. So it's another cool place to check out. If you're a little bit outside of the city, more towards DC, the Emerson Street Food Forest, which is located at 4515 Emerson Street, and the McCallahan Food Forest, located at the intersection of Oliver Street and Jamestown Road in Hyattsville, Maryland, are two really cool community food forests that are open year-round for people to harvest seasonally available fruits and greens from. And forested, if you are nearby Bowie for any reason, is a really awesome 10-acre food forest whose goals is to achieve an advanced forest agriculture model so that forests and people can thrive together. Forested offers tours and trainings throughout the year to provide the public with all the tools they need to create community food forests in their neighborhoods. So they're an awesome resource. I would definitely check them out. They've got a lot going on throughout the year. People are super nice there too. And you can just like eat from the forest while you're on their tours. So it's a plus. And then the Mount Rainier Maryland Community Food Forest is another example of a project that has transformed a small park into a diverse and useful forest garden. According to Mount Rainier Food Forest stewards, this park previously had little to offer except an expanse of turf with shade trees at its edge. But by adding ecologically designed plantings of native and edible trees and shrubs, walkways, and recreation features, the park has become a valuable community asset. And the maintenance of this garden is being carried out by volunteers of all ages from their local neighborhood. So really cool example of how food forests can be integrated into a urban or semi-urban community. Yeah, so I know this was a lot, and it's hard to really encompass all of the complexities of food foresting in like an hour. I know I'm going a bit over time now, but I did try. So I'm sorry, I will be sending out resources so you can read more in depth about all the things I discussed. So I hope you're feeling a bit inspired to get creative and maybe start planning our urban food forest in your community this year. And yeah, so if you enjoyed this workshop and are excited to learn more about urban gardening, tune in on March 21st for our next workshop on bioremediation for urban gardens. where our presenter, Leela Darwish, will be presenting on how to detoxify and regenerate contaminated urban soils to grow healthy and safe food and medicine for urban communities. Um, yeah, cool. So now I know we're running over time, so we'll move into the discussion part of our workshop. So if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to unmute yourself now or share them and put them in the chat. And I will check out the chat now and see if there's anything in there. But yeah, also feel free to unmute yourself and share. Oh, I see in the chat, Sarah, yes, a beer trap out to get slugs that eat cabbage. That's awesome. I love the stacking functions of beer. I personally actually for real don't drink beer, but like I just don't like the taste of it. But I am so glad that slugs do. So like, yes, that is something great for if someone leaves a stale beer at your house and you don't know what to do with it, get those slugs. Um, okay, I see a question from Luis. Can a food forest be planted in a residential area? Um, yes, it can. Sorry for shouting, geez. But yeah, there's definitely regulations depending on where you are. Yeah, that's definitely something that needs to kind of be like negotiated on like a community level, like under the regulations of different like residential areas. Yeah, I know sometimes like community associations or like what do you call them? Like like the people that kind of maintain the aesthetic neighborhood standards of different areas sometimes can get really funky with, you know, things that might not look like a English garden, per se. And I think there's a lot of misinformation and kind of like cultural misunderstanding about like what a ecologically integrated, productive food system looks like. So like, yeah, I think sometimes depending on where you are, it can take kind of like educating, you know, people who are maybe gatekeeping certain developmental standards in various residential areas. But I think it's definitely possible. Um, yeah, and when I was looking at some examples of food forests like in Maryland and DC, there's like a good amount of food forests actually in residential areas like in DC. So yeah, I'll send out some resources and do a little bit more research myself about like what barriers there could be to planting food forests in residential areas. So I will send more resources about that and get back to you. But I can say from Baltimore cities regulations and they're always changing and we're in an election year, so who knows. But I know that we are looking to encourage food forest projects in residential areas and on vacant lots. So there's like a little bit more literacy in some agencies in the city around this. So there's, yeah, I think more of a potential in Baltimore to get these kinds of projects like off the ground. But thank you for that question. All right, any other questions? Oh, well, thank you everybody for coming. Yeah. I yeah, there are many layers of a food forest. There were many layers of information and yeah, like thank you for sticking with me through this. I was like struggling a bit of like what would be the order to present all of this in. But yeah, thank you for listening. And like I said, I'm gonna be sending out a lot of really awesome information. Forested, the place that I mentioned in Bowie, they actually offer a whole amazing like pictorial guide about how to start your own community food forest. And so I'll be sending a link to that out, as well as contact information for them. They're just really great people who've been doing this for over a decade now. So yeah, I think they're an awesome resource. Oh, thank you for all the love in the chat. Really appreciate it. Um, yeah, and also feel free to reach out to me. I'll email out my contact info with any questions. And yeah, I hope to see you all at some of our upcoming workshops. And thank you so much again for coming tonight. See you later.